How many jobs will disappear with the switch to electric cars? Well, there's a reason why Detroit has been so reluctant to embrace electric cars. The unions in particular, and I'm just talking about the unions in Detroit, I'm talking about unions in many countries. Unions in Europe, for example, the union in Germany said that up to half of the automotive industry jobs would disappear if electric vehicles were to become mainstream. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the CEO of Toyota said that there's a good chance 80% of the Japanese automotive industry would be decimated if electric vehicles were to become mainstream. So how many job losses will there actually be if this happens? Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Electric Viking. My name is Sam Evans. Great to have you here on the channel. Thank you for subscribing, for liking, commenting. Let me know. What do you think? How many jobs do you think will be lost by the transition to electric cars? Now, we all know it's happening. It's inevitable. There's no point even arguing this fact. If you don't know it's happening and it's inevitable, then you've got your head in the sand and you're just a bit special. Fortunately, here on the channel, I think most of you viewers are quite intelligent and you know it's happening. It's inevitable. So let's have a look at what will happen once the entire industry will be electric. When considering the transition from gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles to electric, it is easy to see the disruption this will bring to the entire automotive industry, where fewer workers are required to construct an electrical motor than a fossil fuel-powered engine. But it goes much, much, much further than that. We won't need people or machines who make exhaust pipes, mufflers, petrol tanks, and literally thousands of other bits and pieces that go into an internal combustion engined vehicle. But again, as Clean Technica reports, it goes even further than that. A recent dataset revealed that of the 4.7 million people employed in the making, selling, and servicing of motor vehicles in the USA, 1.3 million are employed by dealerships, not stealerships. Anyway, Freudian slip, perhaps. 1 million of those are in gas stations, 900,000 in motor vehicle and parts manufacturing, and a further 880,000 in repairs. For every person employed to make your car, 1.5 people are employed to sell it to you and to service it. For starters, that should tell us something about the desirability of ICE internal combustion engine cars. And I agree. Now, all of these reasons here are very compelling reasons for why people want a battery vehicle. Most people are smart enough to realize that if they can buy an EV direct from the manufacturer, not have to go to a dealership, not have to deal with all the different issues, and then if they know it's going to last twice as long, well, it's quite compelling. Let's zero in on the dealerships. Well, before we do so, check out my video about why Ford dealerships are turning people away and turning them off buying a Ford vehicle. Now, this video has had, I think, more comments than any of the videos that I've made. It was interesting. Obviously, people found it polarizing to some degree. I'll put a link in the description below to that video. If you haven't already seen it, it's worth checking out. Dealerships. Not sure how many of the people employed are salespeople and how many do the servicing, but they should both be looking at their long-term career options. Seriously. Some of the most popular cars are now available online, not just Tesla and Rivian vehicles. Volkswagen and Hyundai are also leading in this direction. In addition, in a number of countries, Mercedes is bringing in direct purchasing online. Subaru and Toyota are doing it as well. So the sustainability of dealerships is looking pretty low to me. I think the model that we're seeing more of in China and more of from Tesla is going to be the one that sticks. That is more where you have a showroom where a buyer can come in and look at the car and then they will just purchase it online. The idea in my mind is that that showroom would exist as a method for the company to sell their cars. So it would make sense for when that sale goes through to see where the postcode is. And then of course there'd be some credit given to that showroom for helping to initiate the sale. It's a little bit like having a dealership, but is not the pressure you get when you go to a dealership. There's not the dodgy kind of pushing you to whatever car they want to sell you. There's not the kind of, oh, someone came in yesterday and we're going to give you a better deal than them. There's none of that involved. It's just, this is the price you pay online. It's that simple. Despite the fact that electric cars need very little servicing, many dealers are still offering service contracts. These are not cheap. In the early days, Tesla did this too. Now, the writer of this article on Clean Techniques says that he remembers being offered a service contract for a Model S when he tested and drove one back in 2014. They suggested he pay for the peace of mind. Now, a friend of his just got his Hyundai Ioniq serviced, which apparently is still a warranty requirement for Hyundai vehicles. Now, he's not sure what they did, but the invoice included a charge for oil. It won't be long before EV drivers realize they don't need scheduled servicing like they did with an ICE car. It was always about the oil when you serviced your petrol car, right? For me, owning a petrol car right now, I'll be moving as quickly as I can to an electric car, as soon as I can afford it. Then I won't have to get oil changes all the time. Another huge benefit, and this is going to affect the industry massively, is brakes. Most electric cars, people just don't use the brakes. They hardly ever use them. Often the brakes on electric cars will actually have a little bit of rust on them because they're used so infrequently. I mean, if you're smart, you just use regen braking. So every time you brake, you just lift your foot off the accelerator and that automatically brakes the car using regenerative braking, which just recharges your battery. In other words, you're not wearing out your discs and your rotors, which saves a huge amount of money because, I mean, replacing discs and rotors on cars regularly is quite expensive. And that's an entire another industry where probably 80% of that industry will die because this won't be the need for that industry to exist in the same way that it does now. A recent brochure from Kia quotes a fee of $3,000 for servicing over 7 years at 15,000 kilometer intervals. His Tesla Model 3 SR Plus has done 60,000 kilometers and hasn't had any regular service yet. After 60,000 kilometers, which ICE car can you tell me that is possible with? There's none. Now, apparently with a Tesla, after 60,000 kilometers, all you need to do is replace the tires, maybe 2, maybe not, maybe more, replace the wiper fluid, and just have a look at the brakes and check them over. Nothing else needs to be done. You can see how servicing is going to take a huge, huge hit. Not for you, for the other side of the equation, which is the dealers. They will lose billions of dollars and obviously have to lay off staff as a result. Now remember, when you buy a Tesla, for example, I have no connection to Tesla here whatsoever. Obviously, Tesla doesn't pay people to say things about them. But when you buy Tesla, as far as I'm aware, in most countries, you don't have to have that vehicle serviced by Tesla to maintain your warranty. Now, I think this will be an industry-wide thing that people will start following this play by Tesla and not require you to have your car serviced every year or every 15,000 kilometers or 10,000 miles or whatever the figure is to maintain your warranty. Therefore, the number of services done will absolutely fall off a cliff. So in other words, dealerships might not need the level of staff they do now. In fact, they definitely won't need them, especially if dealers don't know anything about electric cars and refuse to sell them, as in my video about Ford. I have had this experience personally. I've gone to dealerships here in Victoria and pretty much been shunned by dealers who are not interested in selling an electric car. Reason being, they don't have anything on the floor and they have to wait for stock to arrive. They just want to sell what they have there right now. And what they have there right now, they know will make them money because they sell service contracts for these cars. Now, obviously, service stations will take an enormous hit. Some of them will transition to being full-time electric charging stations, but those will only be destination charges, like ones where you go, say you're driving from LA to Portland and you need to stop at a destination charger on the way. Well, most service stations are not destination chargers, they're just local service stations. Those will probably cease to exist in the way that we know them today. As for car salesmen, well, there will be a heap of used cars available, so they might be okay. And then again, they might not. As you can see, millions and millions of jobs will be lost globally in the transition to electric vehicles. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Now, if we have a look at what Tesla's doing right now, they're roboticizing more and more and more of the production of a vehicle. So fewer and fewer people are needed for the production of a vehicle. Now, Tesla is not alone in doing this. Every automaker will have to do this as much as possible in order to compete in the new world. It's just inevitable. Now, one of the reasons it is inevitable is because, well, I remember when I was a kid, they used to advertise a Toyota Corolla could be bought for $20,000. Now they're about $27,000. They've barely gone up in the space of 30 years. If you include inflation, they've decreased significantly in price. Automakers' margins are actually quite low, between 8 to 10% on cars. To maintain those margins, well, they've had to automate production lines. They've had to manufacture automation lines that could be as streamlined and efficient as possible in order to reduce the costs that you pay for your car today. Believe it or not, cars are much cheaper now than they were 30 years ago. That trend will undoubtedly continue, and that can't happen without robotics. But with robotics comes job losses. So what will happen? In my view, Elon Musk was 100% correct when he said we would need to have a UBI, a universal basic income. Now, originally the name of this channel was called the Electric Singularity. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into what the singularity is, but what I think will happen over the next 30 years is that eventually we will have real AI, not small AIs, but actual real AI. And when that happens, the world's wealth will go up astronomically. I'm talking 100x of what we have now, because AI, a real general AI, will actually be able to solve millions of problems on a daily basis, creating enormous wealth and production. And anyway, I'll stop there. The point is, eventually, most jobs worldwide will cease to exist. Yes, new ones will pop up, but there won't be enough new ones that will pop up to be able to replace the massive number of job losses that we'll see that will come as a result of robotics. Just imagine when we have literal robots, say a person, looks like a person, talks like me, acts like me, can work like me, but it can work 24 hours a day. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't take breaks. It doesn't need holidays. It doesn't need sick pay. It doesn't need to join up with a union. It doesn't need any of these things that us humans need. How long do you think it'll take once these robots are available to replace human beings in labor-specific jobs? It will happen within 12 months globally. So we will see enormous job losses. So eventually we will need a universal basic income. That, I believe, is inevitable, and we can't avoid that fact. So, in other words, I would predict a 90% loss of workers globally. Is this a bad outcome? Not necessarily. Now, whilst it is true that millions of ICE vehicles will be with us for decades to come, and those cars will still need servicing more than before as ICE fleets age, people will actually transition to electric cars much faster than what everyone is predicting. Why? Because eventually people will see ICE vehicles as cigarette smokers, and they will be taxed accordingly, as they should be. We now have the proof that they are basically just huge cigarettes on wheels. They produce toxins that cause cancer, and they should be. But this won't be the big deal you think. Electric cars will become cheaper and cheaper, and people just won't want to drive an old Nokia 3130. They'll quickly transition to a smartphone. Now, battery replacements for older EVs will become an industry sooner or later. And obviously, cars still need new CV joints, 12-volt batteries, tyres, wheel bearings. And yes, EVs are not immortal. Charger maintenance will become a thriving new profession until robots do it, which probably won't take as long as you think. But as soon as ICE vehicles become difficult or expensive to service, they'll be scrapped pretty quickly. In fact, I predict it will happen far quicker than anyone could possibly imagine. Now, the Cubans had no other options, and they have cheap labor. And that's why they still have their old ICE vehicles. And they may still have those for another 100 years. But that's a pretty small market. So ICE vehicles will become increasingly difficult to service rather quickly as soon as it's clear they are a dead-end business. But this will only help speed the transition to electric cars. Tell me what you think will happen to the automotive industry once electric vehicles take over all new car sales? Will there be huge job losses in your opinion? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Disagree? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for subscribing, thanks for watching, and thanks for tuning in. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.